Well, hello there, and today we are doing another tier list video, and this time we are doing all the official Asian countries and territories on GeoGuessr. If you enjoy this video, feel free to smash the like button, but also subscribe if you want to see more of this content. Before we jump straight into this, I'm excluding some countries and territories including Iraq, Lebanon, Nepal, Pakistan, Qatar, Vietnam, and West Bank. So, for the very first country or territory on this tier list, it is Christmas Island. We do not have it on this list, unfortunately, but you can kind of also include it in Oceania because it belongs to Australia, but I'm also including it in this video. And the same goes to Cocos Keelings Islands, which I've also put in fish and chips, but because I don't have it on this tier list itself, just imagine it being there. So the next one is Macau, and Macau is a very small territory or area. It is also a very easy kind of round to get, so you'll have Chinese or Mandarin, and also it's quite a very poor camera quality, similar to that of Germany's. So it's a very handy and easy round to get in GeoGuessr, and you're pretty much guaranteed 4.99k whenever you get it. The next island on this list actually is Guam. I don't know if Guam is on here. It is actually, and that is under fish and chips. Got the side antenna, but also you got a bit of the rack sticking out when you get Guam, which is a good way to separate it from the other two, which is Puerto Rico and North Mariana Islands. And the next kind of region I've included, or territory, is Hong Kong. And this is a similar situation, quite a lot of distinctive clues, got yellow backs, drive on the left, quite a distinctive place to get on GeoGuessr, so it has to be under fish and chips. North Mariana Islands, and unfortunately it's not on this tier list. You can muddle it up with Guam though, so that's why it's a bit more difficult when you don't see the bit of the rack on the Google car. It's still an easy place to get for me on GeoGuessr, and it'll be under fish and chips. Another country that's being added to the fish and chips is Singapore. Singapore is a very small country, but it has a lot of distinctive clues. Urban area, it's got green, big long green street signs. You've got a lot of English everywhere as well. You drive on the left, you've got double yellows, similar traits to the UK, similar with Hong Kong with like the road lines and stuff. And you also get these pedestrian crossing signs, which you don't really get in other parts of Asia besides like Sri Lanka or rare instances in Thailand and Cambodia. So Singapore is a very distinctive area, and also it's a very small country. So you're guaranteed a lot of points when you know it's there as well. Okay, so let's move on to It'll Do, Jeff. And the very first one is Taiwan. So this island is quite a nice island to get in GeoGuessr. It has spiral poles, which is a very big clue. You've also got the language, which is quite distinctive. And I'm okay with region guessing, but it can get difficult at times. And of course, in very remote rounds, you can muddle it with Japan sometimes if you don't know driving side, especially if it's low cam. So be aware of that. But it's right on the border of fish and chips, and it'll do, Jeff. Moving on to the next one, it is If in Doubt, Go Bhutan. Similar situation, it's quite a small country, and it's a very distinctive one as well. Very mountainous, probably one of the most mountainous official countries on GeoGuessr, if not the most mountainous. Also, you got the greyish Google car, you've also got the barricades that are very distinctive, you've got the pinkish license plates. It's quite region guessable at times too, so it'll do, Jeff, for sure. The next country is Laos. And Laos is quite an interesting one because it's quite a long country, but it has very limited coverage, but it does have official street view. And the reason why it's very high is because when you have the Google car for Laos, it's very easy to narrow down. I think it's between like 3 cities. And when you don't have a Google car, but you have the yellow license plates everywhere, you also drive on the right instead of the left compared to Thailand. It's very good to separate. When you have remote rounds that don't have these clues, that's why it gets more difficult to me. If we had very distinctive clues everywhere, no matter what, even in remote rounds, that will probably be on fish and chips. Moving on, we've got the UAE. It's quite a small country, and it is quite a distinctive one too. When it's generally very flat, you're near Dubai, but you also got the white Google car, which separates it from Jordan and Israel, if you're confusing with other Middle Eastern countries. And you also have the Arabic, and yeah, it just generally looks a lot cleaner than the other two as well, especially in the main city of Dubai. So UAE has to be up there, and it'll do, Jeff. Okay, so let's move on to the next one, which is Jordan Henderson. And that'll do, Jeff, as well. Similar situation to UAE, different colour Google cars, so black Google car. If you're in the Middle East, that confirms Jordan. You got Arabic only, with a bit of English, kind of, or Latin text, sorry. Quite a distinctive one. You can also region guess very well, especially the very south part of Aqaba, and also there's a lot of clues for the main city itself, Amman. Quite a very easy country. And the next one is Israel. So Israel is probably the highest one to region guess out of a lot on this list so far, I feel. I think there's an Israel document that goes through tips that help you region guess better, but I haven't studied that yet. But there are a lot of distinctive clues in general to identify Israel. So you got the yellow license plates, the blue Israel strip, and yeah, it's quite a distinctive country to get, and it's a small country, but it's also a long one, so you can easily go wrong with the region guessing, but it'll still do, Jeff. On to the next one, we've got Sri Lanka. And this is quite an interesting one because it's hard. It was put harder than I thought it was going to be. I don't know. It's a small country, small island, but it can be hard at times to guess which side of the coast you're on. It's generally a hedge, and for me, I still feel I can get better at it, and I feel that there's not as much meta usage in Sri Lanka compared to the other ones on the list. It definitely feel like it needs more research, but it's such a small country, it's like not as important. But yeah, Sri Lanka is a very easy country to identify, especially with the Google card. You've also got the utility poles, which have the dots towards the top, but not towards the bottom. Gen 4 has low cam at all times, so if you split between like a Thailand, you have low cam, very good chance you're in Sri Lanka instead. So plenty of clues to make it very easy country to get, but region guessing, it can be a problem at times, but I wouldn't say it's a big problem. Okay, so now we are moving on to no thanks, Chief. So the first country we are including is Kyrgyzstan. A very distinguishable country, mostly because it has the red strip on its license plate. It's much more mountainous, so there's a lot more snow coverage than similar country like Russia. And you can region guess it. I mean, I'm still muddled up the mirror meta. I don't know how I'm doing it. Like, I understand. I thought I understand it, but I still muddled it up. But the mirror meta is a thing, so be aware of that. We've also got the big massive lake, which is a very nice thing to have to narrow it down. But I've learnt a few things, so I can't put it too low, but it's probably in the middle where, like, it's good, but I prefer getting the others. The next country is Cambodia. This is an interesting one because when you have the clues, it's a very distinguishable country. So you have the honeycomb utility poles, you also have the cylinder shaped utility poles, the dots towards the top. You've also got driving side, which is different to Thailand, so a good way to identify it. It generally has more houses with stilts on compared to Thailand, but you get overlaps. The problem is with Cambodia is two things. First of all, when it's in a remote location where you don't have those clues, you can muddle it with Thailand very easily, and sometimes Brazil if you don't have the antenna visible. And another thing as well is region guessing. I feel like with region guessing Cambodia, it can get very difficult. And for very close points as well, it's also a difficult country to get a lot of points on. The next country I've done is Malaysia, so this is where it gets interesting. So this is more down to the region guessing once again, but for country identification, Malaysia is quite an easy one. So you have the black stickers on the mainland, and you have the two white marks on the license plate, whereas Indonesia has 3. Good way to identify Malaysia. And you also have double white lines, which Indonesia does not have. So there's a lot of clues to separate Malaysia from Indonesia. Same with the signposts. Signposts are zebras, whereas Indonesia's is not. And also region guessing, it can be quite easy with identifying mainland from offlands, but the problem comes when you're trying to work out the region within the mainland. I feel like that still needs work. I mean, Johore's quite distinguishable, but other than that, I feel like it still needs work from me at least. I know I need to still look at Anku's thing and get good at it. It still needs work, especially for the remote rounds where I have occasionally gone Indonesia and Philippines on very remote Malaysia rounds, but quite a lot of pros get cut out from that as well, so it's not just me. Okay, so for the next one is South Korea. So South Korea is quite a small country actually, and very distinguishable. So you drive on the right, you've also got the language, which is very distinctive. So you got a lot of circle or rounded circles in the text, or symbols. Sorry, symbols is probably a better word, but you don't really get anything like that in other Asia countries, especially in terms of how abundant it is. So it's very distinguishable, notorious for its autumn coverage. But the problem comes with region guessing. Like Seoul is quite distinguishable, I feel like, and Jeju is distinguishable with its, volcanic like seawalls or just walls in general. But other than that, I am not great at which coast you're at on, or whether it is central. It still needs a lot of work, so I can't put it in It'll Do, Jeff, because my region guessing in South Korea is not the best. And finally, the last country I've put is Thailand. And similar situation with Laos, very distinguishable country, but it drives on the left, unlike Laos and Cambodia. You've also got the dots working all the way to top to bottom, which is another clue to separate it from Cambodia. And in terms of distinctive clues, it's very handy. I also know some area codes now, so I can also actually do a bit better region guessing, but it is a nightmare to get close guesses in. So the north can be quite distinguishable with its very hilly environment. Some of the south can be very distinguishable with its like oil palm plantations. But even then, you still don't really get that many points than you think you do. It's a much bigger country than people think it is. It's bigger than Cambodia, and I feel like the region guessing is getting better, but there's like a lot of space within those regions that can be narrowed down a bit better. But yeah, Thailand's easy country to get, but it still needs to work with the region guessing. Okay, so for now, I am moving on to if, buts, and maybes, but not quite absolutes. And the first one is Japan. So Japan, very easy country to identify, but region guessing is a pain in the backside. I still need to recover the Japan document. There's a lot of meta availability out now for Japan, so I still need to catch up with it. So it should get better over time once I study it. But region guessing wise, it's not great. So if you exclude the Hokkaido cabbage, the Yamaguchi guardrail, which is yellow, there's not really much to go with. It's mostly a hedge or a vibe guess. Like, I'm sometimes good with identifying the islands, but I'm not good with identifying which island. And when I mean islands, I mean the really south ones. So it needs a lot of work. It can be done a lot better. Okay, so for the next one, it is Turkey. So in this occasion, we're only including Asia part of Turkey, which is like the majority of it. You've got the bollards with the white stick with the red only reflector. You can kind of region guess it a little bit, but it's such a big country. Like, you can know the side of the country you're on, but you don't get many points. Still needs a lot of work, and I haven't covered much with Turkey. I've learned a couple of things, or a couple of pro tips, but in terms of the country as a whole, I'm not really strong at. So it has to be one of the harder countries in Asia to get a good score in, unless you get some very striking clues or a good hedge. Okay, so for the next one, this might surprise a few, but it is Bangladesh. So Bangladesh is a very easy country to identify, although I did mess it up with Indonesia in the geofraud, so it can happen. The main issue with Bangladesh is region guessing, especially the Gen 4. The Gen 4 is a bigger problem, but I can't read the script either, so that even makes it a bigger problem. I can't really use much unless I see it in Latin text. So Bangladesh has to be one of the harder countries. Mongolia is a similar situation. Very easy country to identify, mostly from its Google card, how remote it looks like. Very remote location where you don't see the Google card. You can muddle it up with some parts of Russia sometimes. I have done that before. But the main issue with Mongolia is how much meta there is to confirm which little parts you are in. Mongolia is a huge country, so if I've studied the actual guide and I've remembered it very well, then it's much easier than it actually is. But even those who are really good at it can still go very wrong with it. Some clues you can identify, like you can use the environment quite well, but it's very extensive. The guide is out there, the document's out there for people to learn. I haven't really covered it much at all. Some point in the future I will. But yeah, Mongolia has to be one of the hardest countries in Asia, no, without question. And the final one out of if, buts, and maybes that I was debating whether to put in raw quiche and a rice cake is actually Philippines, if I can find it. So Philippines, quite a nice country to get. So main clues, it's got concrete roads, it drives on the right, and unlike South America, it uses a lot more English, but also has Spanish as well, so good way of using Spanish, good way to separate, like, you know, from a Malaysia and Indonesia, a Thailand, or any other country that uses Latin text in Asia. So Philippines can be quite nice to get for identification purposes, but you can get incredibly baited sometimes with Philippines, especially in the remote locations. So I feel like with the Philippines, remote Philippines and remote Indonesia are probably the worst remote rounds to get in Asia, I feel, if you exclude the likes of Mongolia maybe, because you can actually muddle up the country as well rather than actually just getting a region. The thing with Philippines as well is the region guessing is terrible. Other than learning where that most of the palm trees, I've found it more towards the south part of Philippines or the southern islands. You can still get them really north sometimes. So there's not really a clear pattern for it. There's a general pattern, but it's hedging. So Philippines is one of those things where, like, if I can identify the islands, then it'll be a lot easier. But I'm not really good at that. I can identify Luzon a bit better recently, but all the other islands, I just have no clue what I'm doing. So Philippines has to be, if buts and maybes, purely down to the fact it's probably one of the hardest countries, probably the hardest country for its size to region guessing, not going to lie. Okay, so like I just mentioned, Indonesia is a very hard country, and it is the first one under raw quiche and Araski. There are two main factors here. The first factor is sheerly down to the country's size. It is absolutely massive. It's also quite long, so it's very difficult to get points. The second thing is region guessing. So I'm still not the best at region guessing, like Java routes, yes. So some distinctive routes like in Sulawesi, in Sumatra can be identifiable, and sometimes the really far east islands towards like Papua New Guinea can be identifiable, but I'm not consistent with it. And even if you get those islands, you're still going to struggle with points at times. Not the small islands, but like, you know, the bigger islands like Sumatra, Sulawesi. I'm not strong with Indonesia. It's probably one of the weakest countries in the game. And another thing with Indonesia, you can actually muddle it up with countries a lot of the time. So if you don't have many clues, you can easily muddle it up with Borneo, Malaysia, or Malaysia in general. You can also muddle it up with a very common thing is muddling up Sulawesi for Philippines sometimes. It does happen. So be aware of that. And Indonesia is definitely one of my weakest countries in the game. And the second last country I have put in Rockies and Uralsk is Russia, and this is a nightmare. I haven't really studied Russia roads very well. Country identification is probably one of the easiest on this list, to be fair, for identifying the country, especially if you're just only considering Asia, because obviously Ukraine's excluded. You can't really confuse it with anything else unless you get baited with Turkey somehow. But the problem is, it's an absolutely massive country. Even in Asia, which is the majority of Russia anyway, it is a very, very hard country to get a good score in, unless you have very distinctive clues. Like some of the islands really far east are quite gettable, and the super far east can be very handy, especially the white gulka. And you've also got the fruit trees, or the berry trees, sorry, like, you know, the very southern parts of the west side of Russia. There's also some other regional places I can get close, but there is so many parts of Russia where I can struggle with points. Like I can know it's Surgut with a sand and still only get 4k. It's an absolutely massive country. It is very difficult, and it's probably the most important country to get good at on Geo based on how big it is, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of willpower to get through those roads, because technically you need to learn the roads to have any chances with Russia. So it's definitely, probably in terms of longevity in the game, it's always been my hardest one. But we're moving on to the final one, which is now the hardest country in Asia for me, and that has to be India. Sorry, Dustin, but I have to put it as difficult. It's a new GeoGuessr country. I haven't had much practice on it either, so when it does come up, I am generally clueless. I am currently going through your videos. I've watched the first one. I still need to watch your last two. It will help me get better at it, but quite frankly, it's a very big country in general. I know there's only a limited amount of coverage, so it makes it a bit easier to learn probably than Russia, but at the same time, it is very new to me, and I just need to start learning stuff. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So here is my tier list of all the Asia countries. I hope you've enjoyed this. Feel free to share your opinions down below. Will you do anything different to this? Feel free to let me know. But yeah, thank you all for watching. And yeah, if you want me to do an Africa one, especially with the new coverage for the new countries, feel free to smash the like button as well. But yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Yeah, of course.